In session 3, we will be talking about connecting with spirits. Our first talk will be on the importance of compassion, connection, and communication, action and reaction, presented by Danielle Assisi and Nicole Tempel Assisi. Danielle T. Assisi, MPA, PMP, has been an active participant in the Spiritist movement in California for over 10 years and has spoken throughout the U.S. and abroad. Passionate about education, Danielle works in education reform and is currently pursuing a doctorate degree in education at the University of Southern California. He also holds a master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from USC and is a credentialed project management professional. Danielle is a member of the board of directors at Blossom Spiritist Society in Los Angeles, where he lives with his wife, Nicole.
Dr. Tempel Assisi has founded several schools in Southern California and is a professor of educational leadership at University of California, Los Angeles, and California State University, Dominguez Hills. She has more than 10 years of educational experience in the United States, Germany, Brazil, and Mexico. Dr. Tempel Assisi holds a doctorate degree in urban education from the University of Southern California and 2 master's degrees from the University of San Diego and Point Loma Nazarene University. Originally from Germany, she rediscovered Spiritism through her husband and is passionate about looking at Spiritism through the lens of pedagogy.
It's fantastic to be here. Dr. Schwartz, I don't know if we officially made it to evening yet, but good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time zone you are. It's great to be here. It's still early for me, so it's time for second lunch, but that might also be because lately I'm eating for 2.
It is truly a pleasure to be here today. And we will speak today about the importance of connection, communication, and compassion. And we bear for your indulgence as we try to do that. We hope to also make it a little bit lively and interactive.
Since we definitely don't claim to be experts on how to communicate perfectly, but have quite a lot of experience on how not to do it. So, so you'll get a little bit from both of us on sort of the do's and don'ts and how all that links back to Spiritism and to the idea of connection and compassion. So I'll hang out on that side for a little bit and you get to enjoy my husband.
If you may, let's start by imagining. It was a beautiful evening, and on the road out of Jericho, a crowd slowly walked in the dusty, single road. And this was already towards the end of Jesus' stay with us here on earth. So there was a crowd, and besides the crowd that followed him, also the disciples walked among them. And at that time, the distances were great, and it took time to go from place to place. So as the evening spread out against the sky and those beautiful hue, rose, pinkish tones became apparent, I imagined conversations taking place. And as that crowd slowly moved through the dusty road, it would certainly be a sight for others to see. In fact, far ahead, on the corner and the part of the road destined to those who don't have much, lay a beggar, a blind beggar, Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus, hearing all the talk of all the crowd that was coming close to him, asked, What's happening? What's happening? And those around him said, It is Jesus of Nazareth coming out of Jericho. And all of a sudden he starts screaming, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me, have mercy on me. And as the crowd slowly passed, tired by walking, you can imagine, many of them just said, shh, shut up. Don't you see that Jesus is going by? But he went on, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me, have mercy on me. And this great figure this great personality, which has often been misinterpreted throughout the 2,000 years that have taken place since he was first with us, stopped and asked, "What is it that I hear?" And they told him, that group around him, "It is Bartimaeus, a blind man." And he said, "Bring him here." And the crowd then, as all the crowds always do, just passed the message on until we reached the blind man on the corner. And they said to him, "Rise, Jesus wants to see you." And he did. He threw out his robes. He came towards Jesus with the help of those around him. And Jesus, from a place of wisdom and knowledge, asked him, "What do you want from me?" And the blind man, without hesitation, said, "Lord, I want to see. Rabbi, make me see." And Jesus said, "It is so. You can now see. Go forth." And what is interesting is that the blind man then joined the crowd and follow along with Jesus. And it is this context of finding a person along the street and asking the right question to obtain the right result that we want to start our talk tonight. Because if this story that we find in Mark chapter 10 is really a beautiful symbolism of ourselves and the road to life, it is worth for us to notice that earlier on, a couple of paragraphs before this story in the Gospel of Mark, which we find in the New Testament, the pearl of wisdom, we find two disciples, those close to Jesus. We found James and John, both sons of Zebedee, who also make Jesus a different question, a different request. They say earlier, "Master, we want to sit at your left and your right. Will you grant us this?" And the master and the teacher, that is Jesus, says, "You know not of what you ask. Unless you go through the baptism that I go through, unless you go through the challenges I go through, you are not deserving to sit on my left and on my right side. In fact, it is not for me to grant the left or right side. It is to my Father." And interesting enough, the other disciples then hear that James and John ask for this, and they start a lively conversation. And they say, "Why were you asking to be the left and the right? Who's more important than who?" And they have a lovely argumentation about who should lead them and what hierarchy they had among themselves. And what we see there is two different types of questions. One in which James and John were asking for achievements, for positions, for things that would give them status, and that was not granted to them because it would not benefit them and they would not be prepared for that. And the other, however, the more beautiful of the two stories, the blind man asked the rabbi, "Sir, can I see?" He asked for an ability to do something, to fulfill his own achievements, and that he was granted. So with this story in mind, that we really want to start talking about the importance of connection, communication, and compassion. And we hope that you will have some compassion towards us. Put up with us for a couple of minutes. And
Or longer if you're married to him.
Compassion, so that we can investigate this interesting topic. We will go back and forth, as you know, and we'll talk about the different topics. But we want to start by connection, the importance, obviously, of connecting with others. But before we do that, we want to give you three main ideas we wish to cover today. And our main points are simple. One, conflict is natural, it's inevitable, and it is necessary, it is part of life. And hopefully we'll look at them differently as we move forward. Two, our second main point, is that connecting is also essential to our spiritual growth, to our emotional development. And third, that communication is the key to overcoming these conflicts and to connecting effectively with others so that we can move forward. If nothing else, these are three things that we want you to take away from today's conversations that we're going to have here. So far, so good? Okay. So here we go. So if we talk about the importance of connection, we understand that much of our lives has to do with talking to others, establishing bridges, and learning new understanding, and gaining new understanding. However, we also know that any time that we connect with people and we have a relationship of them, what will happen? What lies in the middle of connections?
Conflict. Conflict's in the middle of
Conflict is
connection.
always in the middle of connections, isn't it? But what is conflict after all? We often think that conflict is drama, but it isn't. Conflict, we want to tell you, it is not drama. It is simply two people seeing things in a different light. It is also inevitable because we are all different. Therefore, at one point in time in our relationships, whatever relationships we have with each other, because we are different human beings, because we are different spirits, we will have different viewpoints, and we will ultimately reach a point of conflict where we see things differently and we want things differently. And we're going to talk a little bit about this because we posit that conflict is the result of a need that we have that is not met. When I need something and Nicole needs something else and we don't communicate effectively, we have a problem. So we want to repurpose conflict as an important opportunity for us to learn, to grow, if we can leverage that effectively. If we can truly see it with new eyes, like the blind man, learn to see it in a different light, and move forward. Because one thing we already know, that if we do not do this, and we haven't done this very well throughout our history, conflict can disconnect us from others. If we don't tackle those problems now, we will likely draw ourselves apart from each other. And if that happens, we lose a multitude of blessings that we can learn from other folks. And also, conflict is naturally worsened by the lack of communication. And for instance, I just miscommunicated with my little clicker here. But that didn't generate conflict, did it? All right. So while connection is very important, is the first C that we're going to talk about, they really are intermingled. And when we say that, we really mean it. So when we talk about communication, we always talk about overcoming the conflict so that we can have a personal gain, so that we can achieve something, which is very good, which is very normal and very positive. But we're also reminded in the Spirit's book, that great manual, that great reference book from the great research undertaken with spirits and mediums throughout Europe in the 1850s, that in question 132, Kardec asks, what is the purpose of our life here in the physical world? And the spirits answer something that which we already know, and we are getting there, which is God imposes reincarnation for the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. That is, we go through phases so that we can learn. And I think all of us intuitively understand this. We all know, in one way or another, why we are here, don't we? But we often forget that this is the first part only of that question. The wise spirits go forth and tell us a second part of that question that we are not always very mindful of, which is, it also has a further objective, which is to place spirits in situations where they can play their part in the creation. So not only must we learn to overcome our challenges and evolve ourselves, but we must also play a role in helping others and the world around become a better place too. And with this dual lens that we need to remember, it is not just for us. By helping ourselves, we're also helping others. And by helping others, we also help ourselves. So when we speak of communication, we speak of this ability to effectively jump through these hurdles, clear the air, and be able to move forward, not ourselves only, but those around us.
So I'm glad you brought up clearing the air, because for a while now I've been wanting to talk to you about all these Spiritist events that you go to. Because honestly, you go to so many. I mean, you're tired. This can't
Come on,
be
there are
good
not
for
that
you.
many. There are just a couple of weeks every year.
No,
Not that
like
many.
you always go to. he
No, I don't always
goes to
go. I
Spiritist
don't
events.
always go. You know that very well that I don't always
I
go.
don't know you. You're always here. So you know, you just need to take some time off. You just You always go to these things.
You think so?
Uh-huh.
You know, I think you're right. I think I should take some time off. Maybe next week, maybe next week, I can go play golf with a couple of friends. I do need some relaxation. That'll be great. I am really tired after all.
So what happens a lot of time with communication is that we say things, and those of you that are married have probably had many similar conversations, because sometimes we create problems, or we observe problems and we have a need, but rather than us stating our own need, clearly if you're a man in the crowd and you have a wife at home, you know that what I really needed was for him to be home. However, I never said that. And so what happens in a lot of relationships is that we say, you're just never home. But that conversation could have gone really differently. And maybe before we hop into how to communicate, maybe we could try that conversation again and do it a little bit different. So Daniel, in the last, I think since February, you haven't been home for longer than a week. And I mean, I'm pregnant and I'm feeling kind of needy. And, I really wish you were home more, because I just kind of get sad at home and it's kind of boring, and I want to decorate the nursery and there's all these things that I want to do. I just really want to feel more connected to you.
I hear. Thank you for telling me how you feel.
So can you not go to the other events?
I hear you. I hear you, but I hear you, and I want you to understand that Spiritism is also very important to me, because I learn a lot. I grow a lot when I go. Mm-hmm. And I understand how you might feel a little bit lonely and alone when you go home. So could we maybe work a solution where maybe you can come to me to an event?
Oh, like the one in Dallas?
Like the one in Dallas. Or maybe we can just put it on our schedule to spend an actual weekend at home together.
I would like that a lot.
Thank you.
He's so sweet. But what we wanted to touch base about a little bit, there's a top right?
Top right.
Top right, fantastic. What I've had the amazing pleasure to have had in my life for the past few weeks for the past few years, is a relationship with somebody called Marshall Rosenberg. And if you don't know Marshall Rosenberg, he's a phenomenal man who really, during the civil rights era, figured out a way that we can talk about conflict and that we can use a framework to communicate that might work a little bit more effectively. And I think what Marshall Rosenberg did incredibly well was to really lay out a framework of how to express ourselves, how to hear others, and how to resolve conflict. Now, the conflict that Marshall Rosenberg addresses range from international conflicts between countries. He was recently in Israel. He's been all over the world. But a lot of these strategies I actually use with students from kindergarten through 12th grade. And what we really look at is how can we focus our consciousness, focus our energy on these things, on making an observation, on really looking at something. And in the second scenario, hopefully what you heard me say is actually something that is true, is that since February, Daniel hasn't been home for more than a week. So rather than me saying, you're never home, you're always gone, it's like, no, this is a fact. Here's something that I have observed. I have seen you not be at home. So that's making an observation, stating our feelings. And it's interesting how inept we often are at figuring out what we really feel. How are we really feeling about something? Because a lot of times we put our needs and our challenges on somebody else. Oh, Daniel, you must be tired from traveling so much. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but that's not for me to decide, because this conversation isn't about me trying to figure out what Daniel needs. This conversation was about what I needed, and so stating my feelings, the fact that I'm sad, the fact that I might be lonely. But as a collective, we've just become very poor at figuring out what our feelings are, and we don't think about the fact that our feelings really are connected to our needs, and that those needs are either being met or they're not being met. And when a need is being met, we feel certain emotions that we might describe as happy or as good. And when a need is not being met, we might identify that feeling as bad, although I hope that as we speak a little bit more, we can get away from the language of sort of good and bad feelings or good and bad needs, because they all just are. And as you encounter different people, what I want you to think about is that all of us are just continuously trying to meet our needs. And some of us are really great at it, and some of us are not so experienced at it. And so what happens is we encounter conflict because we're not sure how to meet our own needs, so we go about it in ways that are really ineffective. We blame others, we victimize ourselves, rather than just what I would like to talk about and kind of go into more details in a little bit is making a request. And so we're going to go through these different pieces and give you some more examples so that we can focus on each of these, starting with observation, which is actually probably one of the hardest things to master. And a couple of my colleagues here from Los Angeles, we've been trying to talk about needs and observations and how to observe something. And this is really hard because we are so accustomed to judging, to putting labels on things, to the point where sometimes I talk to an adult, and interestingly, children are a lot better at this than adults are, because sometimes I talk to an adult and I said, what happened in your class? What is going on with Johnny? And they go, well, Johnny is just so annoying. And I go, that's not an observation. That's a judgment, that's maybe a label. And then people go like, oh, okay, let me explain it. Well, he's, I think there's something wrong with him. Maybe he has ADHD, and I'm going, okay, now you're making a diagnosis. I still don't understand what's going on with Johnny. What is so annoying in your relationship with Johnny? And I get a lot of opinions. And so what we try to work on in the schools that I work in is really making an observation and saying, well, Johnny has a hard time staying in his seat. And I say, do you know that it's hard? Are you trying to diagnose again? They go, okay, well, Johnny every 3 minutes gets out of his seat. I go, okay, great, that's an observation. So every 3 minutes, Johnny gets out of his seat. And what does he do when he gets up? He walks over to the trash can. He walks over to the whiteboard. Okay, so every 3 minutes, Johnny gets out of his seat and he walks around the room. Is that accurate? And they go, yeah. I go, wow, that's really frustrating. I now understand what's happening. And I now even maybe understand what you're feeling, but why don't you tell me what you're feeling? And so if we talk about then feelings, but the challenge in English, and the blessing in this room is that some of you are from many different countries. I'm from Germany myself, and so feelings can be a little distracting because the word, actually, let me hop over to observations. Let me hop over to observations before. When I want you to think about this, because you'll get a chance to practice, I want you to remember this one line, which is when I see, hear, or notice. So when I see Johnny getting out of his seat every 3 minutes, or when I hear him stomping across the room, or when I notice him at the whiteboard. Yes, what happens when you notice him at the whiteboard? I feel, okay, what do you feel? I feel like he is the most annoying kid in the world. No, see, there we go again. That's not a feeling. And you'd be surprised, because in English we say things like, I feel hungry, or I feel like this event is really great. This event is really great is not a feeling. Yet we keep falling into this trap of thinking that whenever we say the word I feel, it must be a feeling. And I don't know if the same is true for Portuguese, but I know in English it can get tricky. So what I want you to think about right now, and this is where the K-12 educator in me might really annoy you, but bear with me for a second. I want you in a minute when I say go, actually to turn to somebody, and we're going to try to do a little exercise of thinking about how many feeling words we can think of, because this is actually going to be harder than you think. I want you to think of feelings when your needs are met. So how do you feel when your needs are being met? And I want you to think of feelings when your needs are not being met, and so that you can see the person next to you, because this could be really awkward if you don't know who you're sitting next to. Can we get some lights so that people can see who they're sitting next to? This could get really awkward otherwise, like, hey, you, over there, where are you? So when I say go, I'm actually going to be really unfair, and I'm only going to give, so right now, look at your elbow partner. Who's that person that you're going to talk to? And go ahead and point at them for a second, just so we know that you know who you're talking to. You can be a group of 3 if you want to. Now, one of you is going to be person number 1. Person number 1, go ahead and lift your hand in the air. Person number 1. All right, number one, put your hand down. Person number two, put your hand up in the air. You guys are good. Okay, so are you ready? I need you completely silent so you hear these really crucial instructions. Person number one, you are going to have 47 seconds to come up with as many feeling words as you can. And person number two, you're going to listen. Because when person number one is that you're going to do two things, person number two. You're going to count how many words they come up with. And since we're not in a kindergarten classroom, this is really great because you can all count past 10. It's fantastic news. So you're going to count how many words, and then when they are done, without repeating, you'll have 33 seconds, and you'll get to say as many words as you can, and person number one is going to count them. So person number one, again, you're going to speak first. Person number two is going to count. You'll have 47 seconds. And then person number two will have 33 seconds. All right, go ahead and find your partner. Get set. Go. All right, you got 15 seconds. It's hard because this is usually when you run out of ideas, so keep pushing yourself. 15 more seconds.
It's okay. That's good. Switch.
All right, and time. Person number two, you have a number that you're holding up right now. You're going to transform that number and somehow remember it. And you're now going to talk about feeling words. You have 33 seconds. Go. All right, I need your attention in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, you did it. So here is what we're going to do next. Just out of curiosity, you each have numbers. Go ahead and take no more than 5 seconds, either in your head or with the help of your smartphone, to add your two numbers together. Now, if you had more than 5 words, go ahead and raise your hand and keep your hand up. Together. If you had more than 5 words, together. This is all about teamwork, connection. If you had more than 10 words, keep your hands up. If you had more than 15 words, keep your hands up. If you had more... Not repeating.
Not repeating.
There you go. If you had more than 20, keep your hands up. 25? Oh, we got a couple in the... More than 30. This is kind of hard. What would you say if I told you there are more than 4,000 words for feelings? Yeah. Just in English. So here's the interesting thing. You had about a minute and a half, a little bit less. But in that minute and a half, some of you got all the way up to like the 20s. But it was hard. I saw some of you going like, I can't think. Like, what are these feeling words? And if we, just so it's easier for folks to see, if we can turn the lights down again. What we noticed is that it's really hard for us to figure out what we feel. And most of us, I think I can guess what was on your list of the first 5. You probably had happy, sad, maybe angry. And then maybe it got harder and you were like, really happy, really sad.
Really hungry.
But it's hard to come up with these words, and that I think that in order to connect with people, it's hard to have a dialogue about what's going on if we don't even know what we're feeling. If all we can point to when something is going on for us is that we're either happy or sad, it's going to be really hard to figure out what we might need and how somebody else might help us. Because if I don't know that I'm feeling, although this one, many of you probably thought of this one, if you're feeling annoyed, but what about uneasy? Maybe you're feeling embarrassed or scared, tired. You know, on the Nonviolent Communication website, which is a website put together by the foundation that Marshall Rosenberg works on, they have feeling words actually listed by what you might be feeling when your needs are met and what you might be feeling when your needs are not being met, which is a lot more helpful than that list of 4,000 words that you can purchase online if you pay $5. I personally don't know what I would do with 4,000 words other than annoy my husband. Guess what I'm feeling?
Today I feel...
But maybe you're feeling engaged, maybe you're feeling hopeful, maybe you're feeling confused. Why is that woman still talking and who is she? Is she really, maybe you're totally confused because you're going, wait, is she really here because she was feeling lonely and didn't want her husband to go? No. But it would be a great story. But what I want you to think about next is really that once you make an observation, you can figure out how you feel about that. So something happens. There's a stimulus. Whether it's Johnny getting out of his seat every 3 minutes, whether it's that the trash is not taken out, whether it's the fact that nobody showed up to give passes, or whether it's that, you know, you didn't get to be put on the lecture notes, whatever it might be, that's a stimulus. That's an observation you can make. So how do you feel about that? Really kind of dig down and figure out how you feel. Maybe you're feeling sad, you're feeling disappointed, you're feeling frustrated. And so then identify what that need is. What is that need that you have? Because if you don't know what you need, you can't fix it. And ultimately, you are the only one that can figure out what you need and take care of your needs. Because nobody else can do that for you. Some of the needs, you know, you might have a need for beauty or for aesthetics. Maybe you're saying, you know, maybe it's not about the smell of the garbage. Maybe you're like, I don't like how it looks. Like when the room's really messy, like my need for cleanliness or my need for beauty isn't being met. Or, you know, maybe you're just really sad and someone's like, cheer up. And you're saying, you know, that's really frustrating to me because I have a need to mourn and to just sort of be in the moment. And that's okay too, but then you know what you need. So looking at this list, and I'll read it to you just in case it's hard for folks to see in the back. And these are just some examples of needs that we thought were common enough that we wanted to list them. The need for beauty, mourning, meaning, the need for community, authenticity, for people to be real with you or for you to just get a chance to be real, a need to be valued, a need for autonomy, for you to have your own choice in things, for honesty, for safety, contribution, to be able to participate, transparency, to know what is going on. A need for play, just to be playful, to tell jokes. And on the flip side of that, some people have a high need for seriousness. They don't enjoy that playfulness. A need for empathy, for someone to identify with you. A need for love, for respect, for mutuality, for acceptance, or for support. Once you can figure out what your need is, you can then say, you know, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling lonely because my need for contribution isn't being met. I want to be part of this. I really want to help. Or I'm feeling sad because I wanted to help you create something. Think about all those ways that occurs every day in our daily lives. And it doesn't mean that just because someone's need isn't being met and now you have conflict that the world is over or that you should ignore it. Because sometimes what we do too is that when a need comes up, we just ignore it and we go, you know, that's okay, maybe next time it'll be better, but that just festers inside of us. So all of us have these needs to different degrees. Some people need more acceptance, some people need more play, some people need more communication, some people need less. And that's okay, but think about what those needs are and remember the fact that they are rooted in feelings, so that then, at the end, when you're looking at your list of 4 pieces, you can make a request. And what I want you to think about when you think about making a request is that it's not a demand. When you make a request to somebody, as you noticed in the first example that Daniel and I gave you, I made a request for him to stay home, and he said, you know what, I can't stay home. Spiritism is incredibly important to me, and I want to go to this event, but maybe we can come up with something else. So it's not me saying, you know, I'm sad, therefore you need to stay home because I have a need for attention. It's me saying, you know, this is how I'm feeling, what can we do about it? And saying something like, would you be willing to, or can you help me come up with a plan for this? Because ultimately, I have a need. That need is my responsibility. It's not Daniel's responsibility. Yes, he married me, but meeting that need is my responsibility. And if he said, I can't stay home with you, I can say, you know what, Marcel, can you have dinner with me? Like, I just need to connect with somebody. I just need to talk to somebody. Daniel's traveling. Like, can you and Andrea just come and have dinner with me? And I'm still meeting my need, but it's not a demand on somebody else. It's making that request and then figuring out a way to fulfill our needs and remembering that we are responsible for our own needs. So as you think about that, we thought we'd leave you with one more scenario. And this is another thing that probably could happen, but it's, you know, you finished the presentation.
I did. I knew that you're tired, you're pregnant, so I did it all for us. There you go. I'm trying to help you out.
You like think I'm not smart enough to do a presentation with you? You always do that. You like just go and do things and...
No. That's not what I did. I was trying to help you. You always do this. You know what? Last week you didn't even do the laundry.
You know what? That's it. That's it. Forget just having dinner with Marcel. I'm going home with him. But, you know, in all seriousness, Daniel, you created that presentation.
I was trying to help. I'm noticing that you are a little frustrated about this. Is there something we can do to kind of figure this out?
Why? I want to look at it. Can we rework it together and put my parts in there?
Of course, it would be great. We can go. How about we go over it and then we can decide what we want to keep and what we want to take.
I like it. We'll make a good team.
So, obviously, communication is an extremely important part of our lives. And we communicate for different reasons. But most important is to meet a need that we sometimes do not know that is there. And communicating allows us to connect with other folks, with other people, and see beautiful things and learn new things that otherwise we would never have access to. So you may ask yourself, but where does the compassion piece come in? Because we were talking about me and having my needs met. This is when we go back and we revisit the context that we were talking about in the Spirit's book, the question 132, that says that not only must we meet our needs and evolve and grow emotionally and spiritually, but we also have to be mindful of the needs of others. We have to understand that other folks have needs too. And therefore, we must find a way not only to succeed in dealing with our needs, but so that we can also help others meet their needs in a viable and responsible way. In Spiritism, we are very blessed in many ways because we know that communicating with ourselves is important. And we also have a different facet of life in our Spiritist groups, which we call mediumship meetings. In the mediumship meetings, we even communicate with the spirits. And we actually have to talk to them and listen to them so that we can understand what their needs are and guide them to an appropriate resolution. So compassion really is, in a way we want to posit, the ability to get out of one's shoes and consider listening and asking questions and understanding, to consider the needs of others. And it helps us in doing process. We're not just doing it for other people, we're doing it for ourselves because we are being reminded then that it could happen to us too. In fact, because we have the understanding of life after life, we also know that from previous lives, we come back into our body, we forget about our challenges and face those who we disagree about before, and now in this life, we have the opportunity to address that. And that is what is so beautiful about the works of André Louis, is because he shows us the other side of life and the challenges we face while here and there, and he urges us to address them while we are here, so that we don't have to address when we are there. And this, when he says, we will have the fortune to meet up with our old enemies under the veil of temporary forgetfulness, because when we come back, we forget about our spiritual lives, thereby facilitating the precious opportunity to make amends. So the compassion piece really helps us make those amends in our lifetime so that we don't let them pile up and be dealt with later on. Compassion, then, is our ability to think about that not only for others, but for ourselves. Because we also see, very interestingly, in the Gospels explained by Spiritism, through a message of Paul the Apostle, where he says, outside of charity there is no salvation. Which really is a rephrasing of one of his older sayings 2,000 years ago, where he says, outside of the church there is no salvation. When we look at it with new eyes, we really mean that outside of compassion, of action towards others, there is no way that we can evolve, that we can save ourselves from our own shortcomings. So when we say outside of charity there is no salvation, we really are saying we must put this compassion into action so that we can improve ourselves, and thereby improving the world around us. And what's really interesting here, that Spiritism, being a progressive body of knowledge, is specifically equipped to help us do this, because now we have the evidence of the life beyond. Although we are very interested in the works of science, Dr. Gary Schwartz was showing us today, we have accepted that indeed there is this other reality, this other realm of life, and we concern ourselves more with the implications of such an existence. If there is life after life, then how should I behave? Should I not tackle these problems now before it is too late? Why let it pile? If we don't resolve conflict now, we will have to resolve conflict later. So let's address them now in a productive and meaningful way. And as Spiritists, as we become to dive into the wonderful works of André Louis, of Kardec, and many others that are out there, we begin to realize that the spiritual world is not after the physical world, but it's at the same time, as we have repeatedly spoken here throughout the day. Spiritual life happens right now, and so we must address it right now instead of focusing on things that are just on the material plane. And when we do that, we're always reminded that indeed conflict is natural and an important process of our lives. And it's a great opportunity. We should be excited at the opportunity of bumping into conflict, because we can then learn from each other and grow in understanding. And that connection is essential to our spiritual growth, and to do that, we really must communicate the keys. And when we think of all this and all the great work of André Louis connecting with us from the beyond, compassionately doing so that we can learn how to do that here in our lives, we are always reminded of the Gospel of Matthew, of Jesus, when he says in a beautiful passage we can now understand with different eyes, he says, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and remember that you have a brother or sister that you have wronged, or that has something against you, leave the altar right now. Go back, meet up with them, reconcile with them, solve your differences, and then come back to the altar to offer. As if to say, if you know that your achievements, whatever they may be, are there, but you have not yet connected with others, that you have not really focused on establishing a meaningful relationship and contributing to the world around you and yourself, do it now while you still can, because later it might just be troublesome. It might be just harder. We might run into or become one of those cases we see in André Louis's book. So when we see things with a new eye, when we know what to ask for, it will be given to us. When the blind man was asked by Jesus, and notice how Jesus always did this. What do you want from me? Helping us make the request, identify our needs. The blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. And because he knew what he wanted, and it was a noble request, it was granted to him. And as we think about reconciliation, and we think about communication and compassion, we are reminded of a beautiful sentence by Instructor Druzu in this book, which reminds us that we owe our fates to no one but ourselves. That is up to us to go out there, make the difference in the world that we want so that we can become happier, and so that everybody around us can also find happiness, love, and compassion in their lives. And with that, we thank you very much for your attention, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to speak to you.